On today's episode, I'm joined by Didi, Head of Nutrition at Marchon. Didi, thank you so much for being here and joining me today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No, awesome. I really appreciate you getting back to us and agreeing to this episode, because there's two really cool elements from yourself that I'm looking forward to chatting to. And firstly, that's you didn't obviously start off in the fitness industry, did you? This wasn't your first career path.
No, I did not. No, I was a veterinary nurse in another life. I went to uni to study veterinary nursing, so that's what I have a bachelor's degree in originally. And I transitioned from that after about 6 years, maybe when I was like 24. I went into teaching for a year, absolutely hated that. Then took a bit of a break, came back, did a lot of extracurricular things like yoga, sports massage, level 3 PT. So I had various things that I could draw upon. So I just chose that opportunity to redirect one's life as such.
Yeah, brilliant. And that gap involved going to Asia, am I correct?
I went to India. So
yes,
I did my yoga teacher training course there, so a 200-hour course. So I was there for a month, which was amazing. And then when I came back, I kind of set up a sports massage business and then kind of got in touch with Marchon the gym in terms of offering a nutrition support, and then it just kind of went from there.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, obviously, I think that's really relevant, so thank you for sharing that, because as I said to you on the call beforehand, I think now more than ever, I'm getting people reaching out to me kind of asking how to get into the industry. I'm not really too sure maybe why that is. I think people are a little bit fed up with the corporate world in general, aren't they? So what was it for you that made you think, okay, maybe I want to do something a bit different?
It was a really intense career. I was working in an emergency sort of 24-hour hospital. My entire life was saving animals' lives. It was very, night shifts, intense. Those things I feel like you in your young 20s, like you can do that stuff. But as soon as you start to get mid-20s into your late, you're like, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? And I don't know. I still love animals. They're a huge passion of mine. But I don't think I'd maybe appreciated that was a passion, and maybe there were other things that I wanted to do. And I changed a lot as I grew. I had other interests. I dipped my toes into the fitness world and thought, wow, there are other things in life I like. So it's really brave. And to hear you sort of say you get a lot of those, it's kind of exciting, right? To feel people's braveness, especially, as women and kind of men reaching out and following their dreams and their heart. I've always been a firm advocate of that, so it's cool to see people do that.
Yeah, it is. It's really cool. I really admire people that, 24 is obviously not old at all, is it? But a lot of, like myself, a lot of us in the industry get qualified at 18, 19.
Yeah.
It's the first job you've ever had. So did it seem scary at all, changing what you'd already been to university for? I imagine obviously you would have worked really hard, studied hard to get the degree. Like, did it seem scary to change industries after spending that much time on veterinary nursing?
It did. My downfall was that it became my identity, right? I think at a certain young age, you whether it's sports or a certain career you adopt, it was my entire world. I had no existence outside of not being Didi, the veterinary nurse, saving animals' lives 24/7. It was all day, every day. I showed up, gave my heart and soul to it, which is, I look back with compassion, but I just had no other aspects of my life, which, it gets to a point where you have that self-awareness just as growing in age, to step back and be like, yeah, I don't think this is quite what my life should be like. So yeah, I think it was more just realizing that my whole self-worth and identity isn't a career, and it's not that. I am not my job. It's something that I love and I have passion for, but there's other things I can explore.
Yeah, no, for sure. Would you say you have a bit of a better, well-rounded balance of that now that you're in the fitness industry? Is there kind of more elements to you, or have you just kind of replaced the veterinary nursing with Didi, the coach?
Initially, absolutely not. There was zero balance. No, I was your classic, just transitioned one addiction as such into another, right? I'm a very driven, type A personality, all or nothing. Like, I will give my heart and soul to something. So, my identity in those first few years was just fitness, like that's what I enjoyed, I pursued. I didn't really look very inwards from what do I need? Is this fulfilling me? What kind of route do I want to take with coaching? It was just very much, what's my next goal? Keep moving forward. Very distracted. So yes, those first few years, as any learning process is, no, it was not I'm now zen, entering my world of, cognitive development and growing as a person. I definitely was still too young and I guess naive enough to not.
Yeah. Would you say you've got there now? How are things now with the overall kind of balance and identity?
It's better. I mean, I don't want to say that's an age thing, but I'm 32, so I'm not 22 anymore. When I entered this business, when I think I was about 23 or 24 when I started in the fitness industry, and to see just how much things have changed, not even just me as a person, it's crazy the growth that something can have over a decade of being and watching in it.
Yeah, and 10 years is a long time to get better at anything, isn't it? But I feel like the fitness industry in particular, if you surround yourself with people like you have at Marchon, that you've got kind of no choice but to grow or be better and raise the standards, as you guys say over there, right? So
yeah, absolutely. We're not a slow-paced brand. We have such ambition, and that's clearly why I'm there. That suits me as a personality, and I love it. So yeah, it's those types of people gravitate towards it. It's why we're an incredible team. The people in it are just such unique personalities, and we all complement each other in terms of what we do. And that's why the brand is what it is.
Yeah, brilliant. I'd love to circle back around to that, if that's okay, at the end, and kind of see if you've got any advice for girls or guys listening that are considering, like, okay, maybe I'm having this bit of an identity crisis. Maybe I want to get into the fitness industry. Maybe I've had enough of the corporate world, or whatever it is. If they're considering that transition, it'd be great to hear if you've kind of got any advice for that person. But we'll circle back to that, because what I'd love to obviously chat to you about today is kind of your work at Marchon, and in particular your coaching, nutrition regarding females. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about the role and what it is that you're doing at the moment.
Well, again, I have a little bit of time in this industry now, and if I'm to reflect on my coaching back in the day when I first entered, it was very just black and white macros, transformations, very externally driven, didn't really touch upon the behavioural aspects of people's nutrition and their behaviours around it. Yeah. So it was here's calories, here's macros. I was very fresh out of nutrition science, and like, macros are the best thing since sliced bread. Like, everyone needs to track. MyFitnessPal's amazing. You can scan things.
We've all been there.
I need to tell everybody about this. And that did well for a demographic of my coaching, right? But there was still a large amount that didn't get long-term results. And after a few years of coaching, you should really have the self-awareness to reflect back and be like, what am I missing here? And I did. And that's why I lean now so much on kind of understanding why people do what they do. Especially, with women and, how things in the industry have changed, our perceptions of our bodies, our relationship with food. There's just all these things that I think traditionally we're used to thinking about. I think the nutrition world is still very, to some degree, black and white. We're still adopting a lot of things that maybe, bodybuilding nutrition, meal plans, chicken, broccoli and rice. I mean, we could be here all day on that stuff. So, yes.
Yeah. So what does it look like, the average, not that there is obviously an average, but the average kind of gen pop, real world female, not trying to be an athlete, wants to kind of work with you, that they want to lose some weight, get healthier, improve their relationship with food. Yeah. I know you've obviously got some awesome qualifications kind of in more of that behavioral side of things. Like, what does that kind of starting process look like for you? Like, how do you start working with a female client on their relationship with food, but simultaneously kind of maybe achieve that weight loss goal?
It's hard, right? You do have to separate them to some degree. And I'm not going to sit here and say that, you can do both magically together. For me as a coach, it's important to see, like, what is the priority here and where are the barriers towards them actually getting their goal? Say if that is fat loss, if they're going to constantly be consumed by their emotional eating and they can't deal with the stresses they've got in life, at work, I'm going to be flogging a dead horse. Like, I'm not going to get anywhere with them. So it depends on the degree of where they're at, what's their behaviour. If they had it for 10, 20 years, sometimes these things have been there, whether that's diet culture or, generationally inherited, seeing what your mum did and all the slimming worlds and, the cup of soups and a couple of almonds. Like, it depends on what you've absorbed. Yeah. So I guess my initial focus is to just, for me as a coach, to either have like an intake form that gives me a couple of questions that I can dissect that. And then that's where the one-to-one nature of being on Zoom calls and kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of it comes from.
Yeah. So would you say if someone was listening to this and they were kind of trying to work through this themselves, would you say that's still a valuable task? Like, they should sit down and kind of reflect on their previous dieting history, what information they've been exposed to?
Absolutely. It's the first stage. Self-awareness is, if you don't have that, then you aren't getting anywhere long term. You may get somewhere short term not doing that, but for long term successful, I guess, fat loss, if we're having that as a goal, you need to understand why things haven't why things haven't worked out previously, and why you're still going back to maybe the same things that you've tried previously and haven't worked.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the correlation I see between the clients that get the 12-week transformations and the ones that are working with me 5 to 8 years later is self-awareness. So what can someone do to develop that, in specifically, I guess, in general, but also specifically in the context of their health and fitness journey? Are there any tasks that you get clients do? Are there any questions that they can ask themselves?
I say I try to gauge what their level of self-talk is like. I know that's a bit deep to initially throw out, but how do they view themselves, right? Because food is literally a mirror image of how you treat yourself, think about yourself, respect yourself. So I can look at somebody's day of eating and make some pretty accurate assessments of what they think about them. Do they honour themselves enough to eat regularly in their day? What's the nutrient quality of it like? How sporadic is it? Is there any emotional eating? What are their choices? It tells me a lot about an individual. So even if somebody's super structured or rigid with it, they eat repetitively, that gives me a key insight into probably like where mindset-wise I need to get them to either get through barriers or why they haven't gotten to where they have been, or to see what I need to do to fix any issues with them.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So would you say that you're seeing a bit of a correlation between people that don't prioritise meal times for themselves throughout the day and maybe a little bit less self-worth, like they view the work or other people as more important than them and subsequently their own nutrition?
They may not realise it, but yeah, I'd definitely say there's a correlation, 100%. Yeah.
It can lead to some difficult conversations, can't it, as the coach, especially with someone that you maybe haven't known for that long yet.
Yeah.
So like, how do you kind of, maybe for like the coaches listening or for people listening that want to support like a friend or a loved one through this, how can you kind of have those conversations in a way that's, understanding and empathetic?
Do they want that advice in the first place? Like, I think as a coach, we just want to help everybody, right? And
yeah, guilty of that.
Exactly. Like we're in this industry because we want to help. We're empathic. Like we care. But sometimes if that's not asked for or received, you do have to take that step back. Just as an example, my mum's doing Slimming World at the minute, so I find that hilarious. Just
I didn't see that coming.
Exactly right. I mean, I think I'm going to use it as a comedy routine, but you're not responsible for other people, right? And a lot of my distress as a coach when I first started it was I just took all of that on board. Like, their problems were my problems. If I couldn't fix that, then that meant something about me and my identity as a coach. So I definitely had to work on that because you just wouldn't sleep.
Yeah, it gets draining quickly, doesn't it?
Oh, God, yeah. You burn out within, I don't know, a month, few weeks. And I was getting that way because I was like, I care so much, but you probably care more than them to some degree. Yeah. So you have to have boundaries.
Yeah, no, 100%. What you said earlier about sometimes having to separate the relationship with food and weight loss as almost two separate goals. So I love that. I completely agree. Is that you saying that sometimes you will have a client come to you with a weight loss goal and you will say to them, actually in phase 1 or however you word it to them, we need to not focus on weight loss and focus on your relationship with food instead? Is that sometimes an approach you take with clients? Yeah,
I'll periodise it. Like for example, I have a client now who wants to pursue fat loss, and that's totally fine. But her history, looking back, I'm sat there going, why would we do this right now? Like, this might be a goal you want, and I'm not here to dictate that. I'm here to facilitate it. But let's spend a couple of weeks either getting rid of some of the food rules you've got around eating, some of the beliefs you might have adopted. Maybe you're aware of them, maybe you're not. I'll help you see them in some of the language you use to me when you talk about food. But that could be a 2-week thing. It could be a 4-week thing. It could be a year thing before they get to the point where, yeah, do you know what? If I engage in dieting, this isn't just going to take me back to square one again.
Yeah. How do you, I guess, almost like sell that to someone? If they've come to you with a weight loss goal, at what stage do you say to them, hey, maybe we're not in a position to lose weight? Is it before they sign up? Is it after they sign up? And maybe that becomes a bit clearer from their intake forms. And how do you kind of get them on board with, we need to maybe try a little bit of a different approach this time?
Well, they want fat loss. I'm here for that. If I don't get them fat loss, then I'm a terrible coach. Like, sure, they may want relationship with food, but I'm not here to change the goal for them. So sure, if I'm on a call with them and they're like, right, my goal is fat loss, and I see some evidence of things that maybe I think are a bit red flags, are barriers to them being successful, I'll tell them. Like, I'm honest with them. It's part of building a rapport. Like, I'm not here to immediately week one go, yeah, we're not doing that. Nah, let's go here instead of where you want. Like, you have to facilitate the journey. You know, I'm the vehicle, they're the driver. I'm not going anywhere, or I'm going to be driving into a brick wall if I don't give them what they want to some degree.
Yeah, it's kind of meeting them halfway, isn't it, and where they're at, and obviously, it is their goal at the end of the day. What are some of those red flags that you're looking for? So if someone listening to this is thinking, okay, I've tried dieting a few times before, haven't maybe been successful with it, potentially that's because I'm not really in a position to diet, maybe psychologically or physiologically, but they're like, I'm not really too sure. What are some of those red flags that you're looking out for that would make you go, hey, maybe right now aiming for weight loss or tracking or whatever is probably not the best thing for you?
Well, let's take a woman as an example, right? Fat loss, they come to me, I've got a question in my questionnaire of like, what's your menstrual cycle like at this point? They've got no menstrual cycle, they haven't had it for a year and a half. And I'm like, okay, why? Like, let's just understand, what is your body communicating to you that either you may be aware of, you haven't really thought about it, you didn't realize it was important. So they are, physiological symptoms, and there are psychological symptoms, red flags, right? It's either a behavior, or I get super anxious when I go out to eat on a menu. I freak out. I can't eat carbs. I think I'm going to gain fat as soon as I eat a chocolate bar. Oh, but then I want to lose, 20 kilos. Yeah. So that's my job to be like, okay, how much of this is affecting you right now in your day-to-day? Is it taking up a lot of your headspace? Are you particularly stressed with it? It's their quality of life, right? It's a duty of care as me as a coach to sort of be aware of that.
Yeah. So there's some great psychological kind of red flags there. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the physiological one. So obviously, hyperplastic amenorrhea. Yeah. Your body's not happy. Definitely don't want to be going into a calorie deficit. Mm-hmm. Elaborate on that a little bit more, if that's okay. Like, what other kind of menstrual cycle and hormonal red flags might females be experiencing? Because in my experience of working with quite a lot of female clients now, a good few hundred, they often, because these symptoms are so common, right? A lot of the time they don't see them as an issue. They think they're just normal. Oh, my friend experiences that, and subsequently they don't see it as an issue. So what are some of those other red flags physiologically that women might be experiencing?
Well, they could be things like extreme tiredness, fatigue. They're not recovering from their training sessions. The majority of my demographic are women that are training a lot. They can either be, doing double sessions, CrossFit athletes, or in that kind of realm, or they can just be a weekend warrior and kind of goes to regular classes at the gym. But it's how is their body responding to that? So are they tired all the time? How's their sleep? Are they mentally fatigued? Can they get through a day? Do they need to live off caffeine for the majority of it? What's their stress response like? Heart rate? So yeah, it sounds crazy for a nutrition coach to be saying you take all those things into account, but I can't not at this point, right? Like, health is so multifaceted. If I only focus on one thing, it's ambitious of me to expect that, but that's the service I give, is I need to look at all the facets of health.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of people just think that obviously more training and a better diet, better being subjective here, like less calories, more restrictive, they just automatically correlate that with being better, right? Healthier. Yeah. They don't often understand that more dieting and more training can actually be detrimental and arguably have just as many negative consequences as as being the other way, right? You can overtrain and over diet yourself to hyperplastic amenorrhea, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's definitely something which I feel like more and more females are starting to understand a little bit. Do you kind of see that shift and that trend where females are understanding that doing more sometimes isn't always better for them? Or do you still think a lot of the time your clients are coming to you thinking they need to be pushing harder, training more, dieting harder?
No, I think you're right. The shift is definitely there, which is positive. I think that's because women are embracing maybe more strength training and weights and being in the gym, and not just a lot of cardio or some of the, I guess the 90s brain of just being on a treadmill for an hour a day and experiencing, the issues with that. But it's difficult as a woman to kind of look at how you perceive yourself, your body image. The repetitive cycle of like restrictive dieting is going to leave you on metabolism pretty shot. So often or not, you might be in a healthy place too, but then you try and engage in those things again and you get no results. So I'll get very frustrated women being like, Didi, I'm doing everything. Maybe I'm tracking, maybe I'm doing these things, and I'm just not getting anywhere. And it's hard to be like, it's just not a deficit.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why that deficit isn't working, because, metabolic adaptation, maybe you've lost 20 kgs in the past and you're just fighting a set point that isn't natural for you. So it's just so much context
Yeah, of course.
to take in, right?
So that kind of gives me two questions from that. So firstly, you've got this female, they're in that standard kind of position. They've already lost weight. They've come to us in a deficit, or maybe what should have been a deficit, right, in theory. So yeah, the metabolic adaptations occurred, that they're not feeling great, and they're like, why am I not losing weight anymore? We obviously explain to them, hey, there's some stuff we need to do here to give you a break from dieting, maybe this thing called reverse dieting. Again, obviously, I know this is going to depend on the individual, but what would that process normally look like for a female that's come to you? They're pretty lean, maybe they want to lose a little bit more, but they've been pushing too hard for too long to the point where their body's kind of saying no.
Yeah.
Like, what are the action steps you would take with that female over a few months to get them back into a position where they can then go into a deficit again at a later date if they choose to?
Well, it's food. I need to look at their food. I'm very firm on like visually seeing what people are eating. So I'll normally ask for like a 3-day visual food diary of everything that they're sort of seeing, because my MyFitnessPal tracking is great, but people are terrible at reporting. That's just, human nature. So I'll see what they're eating. What do their portion sizes look like? Are there any mental restriction or rules in the background that are governing this that I can get some super easy wins with and help them sort of work through? So maybe it's they're still just not eating enough carbohydrates. And, your body's, as a female, we need carbs, especially when we're looking at energy availability and calories and kind of supporting what your body needs to function and get back to that state of, I guess, homeostasis, so then they can then diet again or pursue that as a goal.
Yeah.
So calories, carbs, if there's any food rules there, I probably will increase their calorie intake, to be honest, like based on if what you just said as a case comes to me.
Yeah, no, exactly that. That's something I actually got from you is I would have clients sometimes take photos instead of tracking in some situations, but I don't think I ever got a client to keep a food diary and take photos of it, which in hindsight sounds really obvious to do, because obviously the food diary is what I'm taking into account to decide on the starting approach. It's like, are you coming to me saying you've hit a plateau because you've been under eating, or are you just not reporting your calories accurately, right? So you do the food diary, but then this sounds so obvious in hindsight. So knowing that people don't keep food diaries that accurately, why would I also not ask for pictures so that I can compare the pictures to the food diary? And that's something I actually got from you and started doing, which is just one of those things that just sounds so obvious in hindsight, but I never did. And it's really, really useful, because then it allows you, obviously, as the coach, to educate on your MyFitnessPal, or I use Chronometer, but your diary says this and your photos say that, right? So it gives you another touch point to educate as well.
I mean, I just have trust issues, to be honest. I love my clients, but you got to prove to me like what you're eating is accurate. That's part of building a rapport. Sometimes I'll joke with them and be like, look, you say you're sleeping this amount of hours, but you've got to watch. Send me a screenshot. What are your steps like? 8. Is it 8? Is it 7? Is it 6? You just being generous here. As a coach, your clients do, to some degree, want to please you sometimes, and maybe they will psychologically or consciously, conscious or not, overinflate things or underinflate things. So it's important for me to have reality when it comes to, if I'm going in blind and somebody's got a food diary of chicken salad, cup of coffee, oats, I'm like, what do you mean? Yeah. Show me. Yeah. I don't know what that is.
Egg.
Oats is oats. Is that 100 grams? Is that 2 grams? I have no concept here.
Yeah.
Of reality.
Yeah, of course. Which is why keeping that initial food diary, tracked rather than just obviously written is obviously important. But comparing that to the photos, that's a great tip. What you just said there, I'd love to just highlight that back, because that, for me, if any coaches are listening, was something that took me years to get my head around. And that's that your words kind of have weight and clients will want to please you.
Yeah. And
for so many years, just maybe because I was young, I was new to the industry, that just didn't make sense in my mind. And therefore the idea that clients would do things to try and please me or take what I said like to heart is just that just wasn't a thing in my mind, and therefore you miss if you're not prepared to accept that, whether that's coming from a place of insecurity or self-worth or whatever on my behalf. If you're not prepared to understand that that's often how the client coaching relationship will be, you will miss the fact that clients will often underreport or overreport, depending on whatever one's positive, right, to sometimes try and please you. So that took me a long time to kind of learn. Would you say that's the same with you, or was that something that kind of just made sense to you from day one, that this is something that's going to happen to me as a coach with my clients?
Gosh, no. I mean, I'm probably the same. I never thought that would be a thing. It's like, well, I'm a coach. Why would they misreport to me? Like, I don't mean much, but I think we do. We undervalue ourselves and the position of authority that maybe they perceive us to have, which is why, I need to be on their level. I'm not Hitler. I'm not a dictator. I'm not you need to do this. I'm like, do you want to do that? What happens if you didn't do that? What would it mean? Like, you want to lose fat, but you're struggling. So is it worth it? Why? What would it mean if you do lose fat? So I think that allows them to be less like, God, I need to please. So it's your language as a coach, right? If you're there on a call going, I need this from you. You want to do, like, if you're very dictator, they're going to, thrive off that and be like, yeah, okay. But that's very externally driven. Yeah. It's not internal.
I feel like that works quite well almost in the bodybuilding world, or maybe even if it doesn't work well, it's how it is. Whether it's good or not is maybe a different conversation. But from coming from I did junior men's physique competition, so I don't want to say like a bodybuilder, but from coming from the bodybuilding world and having a couple of the biggest coaches in the UK coach me who are awesome, that's how it was.
Oh, really? Wow.
And maybe that, works better, or it's just how it is. And obviously the bodybuilding world is very stuck in its ways. But ultimately, I feel like a lot of the fitness industry learns, or has been, not so much recently, which is great. We're seeing this shift, aren't we? But a lot of the information came from the bodybuilding world. And you get bodybuilding coaches coaching your Gen Pop, and then you get those people becoming coaches, and then they're coaching people like they're bodybuilding coaches, even though they were never bodybuilding themselves, right? And that's how we end up often with these chicken and rice meal plans, this authoritarian dictatorship style of coaching, is the rest of the industry kind of evolves, not the right word because it sounds positive, doesn't it? But it kind of came from the bodybuilding world of the fitness industry, whereas now we've kind of got the fitness industry is almost, I feel like it's a separate thing to the bodybuilding world, and there's a lot of trends happening within it which never came from the bodybuilding style, more of the CrossFit, the High Rocks, and coaches which were never anything to do with the bodybuilding world, and kind of come at it from the stance you do of more of the behavioural change side of things.
No, you're so right. I find that conversation fascinating because I have no history in sports as such, to be honest. Like Marchon as a brand is functional fitness. We're stepping into more of the CrossFit space, and we've always been part of competitions and High Rocks, and then I sometimes I work with clients and I get sent these PDFs or these spreadsheets of macros and bodybuilding plans, and they are very well respected people in this industry, and I'm like, what do you mean? They thought like that's what they wanted you to do?
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it?
It blows my mind that is, but that's still where the industry is at. From a nutrition perspective, say, I've got a nutrition coach. Cool, what's your meal plan? Like, that's the crusade as such that it feels like, myself and Sammy and a lot of the evidence-based coaches are on, which is, some people are like, why do you want to fight that, Didi? But I can't not. It's a purpose, it's a drive. I'm here to change it, and I think, people like yourself, we get out of those phases or, bodybuilding or whatever. And you do sort of just reflect back on, what was that? What was it? I have no idea. But I'm fascinated. Tell me more about, like, I guess the idea of bodybuilding and nutrition, because I'm not particularly educated. I'm obviously on the receiving end of helping people fix that. So I think I'm biased, honestly. Like I feel like I want to throw bodybuilding nutrition under a bus, and I think I'm going to get a lot of hate for saying that. But I just don't have any context. So I guess give me an insight.
The way I see it is there probably needs to be some responsibility on the consumer end as well.
Yeah.
To be like, is a transformation actually what I want? And by transformation, I kind of mean the drastic 12, 16 week photo shoot, whether you get on stage or not. And obviously, I think as a coach, you also have a responsibility to not sell that to someone that doesn't have the prerequisites, or if you don't think that's what they need or want, obviously you should not sign them up or try to steer them in a different direction. But you know, I've signed clients up before. They're telling me all the right things. I've got no reason not to believe what they're saying. I've got no reason not to think that they do want to achieve this more extreme goal of a photo shoot. They don't have any evident red flags, physiologically or psychologically. So if you pair that with also being a 21-year-old coach, not anymore, but at the time, you know, a 21-year-old coach, and you want the client, you want the transformation for social media, you want to grow your coaching brand, and ultimately you want the sale and the income as well. If there's no reason to think that it wouldn't be a bad idea for this person to go on that journey, and they're telling you that's what they want, then you sign them up, and then next thing you know, you put them through the only way you know how to get a drastic transformation, which you know often are unhealthy, and therefore the plan and approach, in my opinion, does need to be fairly restricted and rigid to facilitate an extreme transformation in a relatively short period of time. And you put them through that, and obviously a good chunk of the time, I wouldn't want to speculate on a percentage, but a good percentage of the time it messes that person up. They either don't get to the finish line, or even if they do, it's a real issue at the other end. And then as a coach, if you're one-dimensional and all you're able to do is facilitate that, and you don't understand anything about stress physiology, you know, endocrinology, reverse dieting, how do you fix or unadapt that person at the other end? You can't. You've only got that one tool in the toolbox, right? And then that's when those people often come to then us. But it's just a little bit of a broken system, isn't it? But I feel like there's a lot of responsibility that needs to lie on the client to be like, is this actually what I want to do? But also as an industry, we owe it to these people to communicate that, okay, that might look really great in front of a camera, but it was not healthy getting there. And if you're prepared to go to that unhealthy place, cool. Maybe you don't have the prerequisites and you shouldn't yet, but if you do and you do want to do it, at least you need to understand that this is not going to be easy. It won't be particularly healthy, and just be really sure that you actually want that challenge, because there are some consequences that can occur of that. One of my friends who's a bikini competitor, you know, she's now infertile, maybe for life. That's very sad, but that's because she worked with coaches that didn't understand PCOS, and she had PCOS and won her show and got an invite to British finals, and despite there being about a 6-month gap, stayed lean. You know, you've already got an internal stress state if you've got PCOS, right? And you throw 12 months worth of extreme contest prep from bodybuilding coaches that don't really know what they're doing, you've got a recipe for disaster, and that's very, very sad. But I think responsibility needs to be taken at both ends, doesn't it?
But it's also treating in that situation like women as if they're men, and that we can just do the same strategy, have the same PDF template or spreadsheet of XYZ for, you know, grams and calories, when we're a complete different physiology, as you well know. Our bodies, and we are not small men, and you have to have a level of understanding of that. Sure, it may not mean that you maybe have to adapt too much, but from what your body needs to, you can experience as a male extremes more comfortably than a woman can. Doesn't mean it's not going to be difficult for you. It just means your body's going to respond differently to mine. If I do the same things and I experience the same stress, but you know, stress is subjective, right? It's just our cortisol response to things are different, and that will stop the body doing a lot of things way quicker than it will do amounts.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, the saying that I use on my information page for my course for PTs is, you know, it's not your fault that you don't know that, because if no one in the industry is really talking about the fact women are different, if your average nutrition courses don't ever touch on it, if the PT course doesn't touch on it, then that's your PT. It's not your fault that you don't know that, but if you want to work with females, it is now your responsibility to have a basic understanding of how and why they're different, so that you can first and foremost do no harm, right? Because that's the most important thing when you're working with clients. Is that their goals are actually the second most important thing. Not making them worse has to be the first thing, right? So that's something that I'm really proud of what I've created to do my very small piece to change that. Obviously, there's people in the industry doing much bigger things than me. But ultimately, it's a trend that in the last couple of years, I do see moving in the right direction, which I think is amazing. Like, what do you see in the industry over the last few years? Would you say more people are starting to talk about and understand some key female differences, or would you say it's still not really where it needs to be?
No, I would agree. The conversation has gotten a lot better. But if we're to think about we don't even, it's not even just, as PT's responsibility. As women, we don't know. It's not like, geez, we didn't get taught this even in school. So, especially when you add in things like the pill, which we've probably been on since, 16, 17, or the medical model of managing a lot of our maybe problematic symptoms around the cycle is to just flatline everything.
Yeah.
So when you, as a woman, have spent 10, 15, 20 years flatlining things, how are you supposed to know what your body's going to respond like even without it, or to training or nutrition? So, I mean, yeah, if you take it that far back, whose fault is that? Is that education? Is that ours? Is that a parent's responsibility? Who knows? But at some point, if you engage in those sort of behaviours and you don't have an awareness of it, you could, like, obviously, as you very sadly said, as your friend, experience those things. That's why for bone density, having a menstrual cycle being your fifth vital sign, in my opinion, it is key. Even if you don't want to have a cycle, like, we don't really love having it. So it's just, as a coach, yeah, I think I completely agree. It's a level of responsibility, but I guess not entirely, exclusively.
No, of course. Your everyday female listening, ideally, I think their overall quality of life would improve if they had a fairly basic level of understanding of this, which hopefully over the next few years that will continue to improve as more and more people put out content about it, and that content's kind of easily accessible.
Yeah.
What are some of those reasons that a second ago you just said about, like, we don't like having a cycle, but it's important? One of them obviously being for bone density.
Yeah.
Obviously we know in hypersomatic amenorrhea there's bone density goes down due to the lack of estrogen. What are some of the other reasons why a menstrual cycle is important? As you correctly said, it's it's the fifth vital sign. Like, why should girls care about that as opposed to thinking, oh great, I'm really lean and I've lost my cycle and that's actually a good thing?
Well, there aren't that many, right? There's not a whole list of the reasons why we want to have a menstrual cycle, but it's part of our bodily functions because, say, bone density and estrogen, like, our sex hormones do certain things for us, and if that is depleted or gone or stopped functioning, that's maybe not something you're going to be immediately aware of, but it's the compounding effect of anything. So, sure, I'm not worried when a 24-year-old hasn't lost their cycle for, a month, or maybe it's their first in 3 months. But it's what happens when they're 60 and they break their hip, or what happens in the future. It's more, bone density and these things aren't acute. It's the chronic response of it. So it's more long-term. But then if they don't have a cycle, is it because they're overtraining? Is it because they're underfueling? That's not going to be the only thing there as evidence. Their sleep's going to be terrible. Their nervous system's going to be shot. They're probably operating on a fight or flight response, and that's going to be impacting, well, it can't not, their life to some degree.
Yeah, I'm sure I've seen Dr. Lara Brydon talk about progesterone and cardiovascular and respiratory issues and the increased likelihood of those in later life if you've not had a cycle for a period of time. So there's a lot of roles that estrogen and progesterone do outside of the menstrual cycle itself that are super important. So what would you say? So you've got your female client or the female listener, and they're like, but I love training, I'm scared of gaining body fat, I don't want to train less, because this is obviously something I hear all the time. I would say at least 50% of my female clients are not the standard weight loss goal. They're the other end.
Okay.
They're overtraining. They maybe want to be a little bit leaner, but their body fat's in a healthy range. They're over dieting, they're overtraining, and I need to go through this process with them, like you described earlier, of actually building calories up, etc. first. Like, what do you say to that woman that's like, okay, I need to do this, but I'm scared?
My response being, so what are you scared of? Like, tell me about that, because it's not the. Everybody in their mind thinks, a trigger is the eating more. The consequence is I'm going to get fat. They're not the problems. The problems is the belief around doing that. That's going to end up in a consequence. So I focus more on what would it mean if you did get fat? Say, what's worst case scenario? Say you trained less. Say you ate more. Well, I get fat. What would that mean, though? Would that change your perception of yourself? Would that mean you'd be uncomfortable some way? Like, what is it you're trying to describe here as the problem? Because the problem isn't you getting fat. The problem is what you think that's going to bring about. Is that a feeling? Is that a belief? So it's more If you can dissect that, then you're on a great path to be able to change their cognitive thought about, oh yeah, maybe it wouldn't be the end of the world. Maybe I could train a bit less. What would happen if you didn't train as much? I wouldn't be as much of an athlete. Okay, well, what's your belief around you being an athlete? What's the identity there? Is your self-worth too much married on that? Like, it's definitely psychologically based, and it takes a certain skill to be able to do that. But you're just going to get them in another year's time still contemplating the same process, which I'm sure we're very familiar with. It's a struggle, right, for a woman to take that step between fueling themselves, maybe training a bit less if they're overtraining, and accepting the decade narrative of being smaller is better.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It's kind of like peeling back the layers, isn't it? And I'm sure they didn't come up with it, but I believe I first heard precision nutrition call it like the 5 whys.
Yeah.
So, you say, I feel this, or my belief is that, or this will happen. Well, why do you feel like that? And
yeah,
is that a task that you would recommend people kind of do, even if they're not working with a coach, just to like peel back that layer, ask why, and get to the real root cause of why they would be scared or worried about training less, eating more?
That's great. The 5 whys is amazing, but if you take that step further and go, in my opinion, ask why enough, and you get to who. So,
ooh, I like that.
The who is like, and this is pretty deep, but generally it comes from like either childhood or a belief you've had for a long time. So it could be your perception from your parents that you've adopted, or maybe there was I had to be this certain way, whether that's an athlete mentality and you grew up in a very competitive sport and you've always been high achieving. Okay, so whose approval did you try to win the most out of your parents? Like, who is the who in this? Who are you trying to prove this to? Because if it's not you, it's someone. So if I don't understand who ultimately this is for, and it's not them, then they're going to continue doing it. So it's like, what's their relationship dynamics between that and long-term them getting results?
That's
Makes
great.
sense.
Yeah. It makes so much sense that I'm
it's deep.
I'm going inwards, and I forgot that. That's got me thinking that's powerful. I'm thinking about some of my own stuff, and I'm also thinking I need to change my intake forms.
Okay, yeah.
To add that on and make sure I have that conversation with clients. So another question that's just come to mind now then is, and I guess this is more for coaches, where do you draw the line at these kind of mindset conversations? Because I feel like what I see, maybe correct me if I'm wrong or you feel different, but I see a lot of coaches, they don't want to have those kind of conversations because they maybe feel like it falls out of their scope of practice. And or maybe they just feel like it's a bit of an uncomfortable conversation to have, and they don't really maybe feel like secure enough in themselves to sit there and listen to the answer. But in my opinion, where my coaching drastically changed was 3 or so years in, when I started doing and understanding a lot more of this, because obviously, don't need to tell you, behavioral change underpins weight loss. And so that for me was a real turning point with getting client results. Obviously, if a coach is listening and they want to get better results, or if an individual's listening and they want to get a better result for themselves, how can you as a coach kind of be in a position to actually be able to ask those questions and feel comfortable going there with clients?
That's a great question. At this point, I do mentor people as well, coaches and PTs. I don't expect them to operate, with somebody who's going through training to become specialised in CBT and REBT, which is rational emotive behaviour therapy, and a large, it's more niche than it is. Oh, dude, I'm just a nutrition coach. Like, I don't know what to do with that. What do I do with somebody who has childhood trauma, or like that's the reason they're still not able to change now with their food and their perception of themselves? So, motivational interviewing, some of the lower hanging skills that you can develop just as a coach, they're going to be amazingly useful to just provoke thought in a client. Or say if you see like your intake form, like you just said then, mine's basically just a therapy session in itself. And people generally email me going like, wow, I thought I was getting a meal plan.
Yeah, I get the same.
This is a therapy session. I was like, yeah, welcome to Didi's world.
We do things differently here.
We do things differently here. So I don't expect people to do that, or coaches, especially early on into their careers, but tweaking a few conversations that you have with them, or finding the time to have those. Why is it you feel you struggle? Like, you just need to ask questions and there's a lot of gold in what somebody's response is. So, you know, tweaking your intake form to say, what was your, not just what was your alcohol intake, what was your sleep like, what was this, what was the best part of your week, what do you feel you struggled with the most? I mean, I'm sure these are all things that people are thinking, but I don't think coaches spend enough time on them, because that's going to be the barrier, not the fact that, they may present with, they haven't lost weight that week or whatever, but just saying you're not in a calorie deficit is just not really going to be very helpful.
No, and there's great apps for $10 a month, like Carbon,
right?
which do that now. So if that's your coaching service, you'll get left behind, which is something I've said to some people recently. Would you say that if you want to be a nutrition coach, for the most part, you probably also need to accept that you are also going to be kind of a mindset behavioral change coach within reason too?
The best advice I would give myself is to spend equal time learning nutrition science as I did psychology. If that's where you want to go, I appreciate. If you want to do meal plans, if you want to be prescriptive in nature, if you want to, have that as your service, great. That's not my world. It's not evidence-based. It's not where I want to take the future of nutrition coaching.
Yeah.
Except me and you are different to other people, and I have acceptance of that. I'm not here to change other people. I'm here to give them a different option.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely depends on the demographic, but if you reverse engineer it and, a coach is saying, I want to do the best possible job I can for essentially anyone that needs my help, then it's, as you said, it's 50-50, isn't it? It's just as important skill set to learn. Motivation interviewing, great book, great course.
Yeah.
I'll make sure I get that in the that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Where else would you recommend for maybe individuals listening that go, okay, I need to understand the behavioral change side of this a little bit more, but I don't want to coach, or coaches that want to learn it for their clients? Are there any other resources, courses, books that you can recommend?
Well, PN is great, right? Precision nutrition is a really holistic approach to just sort of looking at people's behaviours and low-hanging fruits. You don't necessarily need to, as a coach, you just need experience, right? The more conversations you have, the better you're going to get at it. We've been in this a long time now. You're just going to develop those over time. So it's ambitious of me to be like, shortcut all of this, read this book, do this course, you'll become me. And I can give you exactly what, or match you to a level of coaching. But everybody kind of gravitates towards, when they're ready to receive that as a coach. If you're not ready to receive it, if you're not ready to explore that area of coaching, then you're not going to. But motivational interviewing, following a lot of people just in evidence-based nutrition is super helpful. So you've got, the Jeff Nippards, you've got James Krieger, you've got some really, or Ben Carpenter, who's just brought out a book, people you can trust within that world. So often I'm surprised when people say, oh, did you hear what so-and-so said? I'm like, I've got no clue. I don't know who that is. I'm so, sometimes I feel stupid when people sort of say, or my clients like, oh, they said that sugar's bad in this. I'm like, who? I don't know who they are. Yeah. They're not on my radar.
Yeah.
But I appreciate them on many other people's radar, and that's obviously concerning.
Yeah. Yeah, putting the blinkers on is important sometimes, isn't it? One thing I believe I got from Phil Lerney is sometimes you might need to go through who your clients are following, and a lot of context depending on your relationship with the client. You're not, again, it's a bit dictatorship-y, so it's maybe not, you might not always approach it this way, but I'd essentially be like, do you know what, maybe unfollow X, Y, and Z.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's misinformation or whether it's body image, because ultimately if you're putting, if you're the angel on one shoulder and then that your clients are going on Instagram and opening X, Y, and Z, then really you're probably fighting a bit of a losing battle. So that was one cool tip I got from him, is actually sometimes you might need to get clients to unfollow certain accounts or certain people, which is something that I think everyone should do a social media audit, really, shouldn't they? And unfollow people that aren't serving them.
Yeah, even me, like, there are certain accounts that don't make me feel good. Either from a coaching, I start judging myself against other coaches. I see what they're doing. I'm like, oh, should I do that? Is that a good angle to go down? But you're right. Sometimes I'll ask clients, right, what are your algorithms giving you at the minute? Like, is it cats? Is it Britain's Got Talent? Like, tell me, because it's giving you what you want. So I need to know what you want in return. And if that's bikini competitors, if that's rice cake cereal, or a load of, non-nutritionally sound advice, then I'm fighting a losing battle when you're spending God knows how many hours looking at that.
Yeah.
Me for 30 minutes a week has got no chance against a feed that's perfectly curated. It's you. It's everything you want. It's designed to keep you engaged as long as possible. So if I can't understand that, then again, flogging a dead horse.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Changing what you're taking in is actually a really important part of a lot of people's journeys, because it's subconscious, isn't it? You know, you see that, you hear that, you look at that image, and it subconsciously goes in, even if you're not really aware of it. And if we're trying to facilitate behavior change in people, then what you're consuming definitely matters.
But even just like transformation pictures, right? I have moved away from that, and I don't have a necessary issue of coaches using it. I appreciate that that's always going to be there. But if your feed is just a see your before and afters, that's your entire marketing, great. But psychologically, what does that do to somebody? And the science shows that doesn't actually lead to action. Like it may be motivating, it may be inspiring, but evidence-based, people don't take action on that.
Interesting.
They don't. Like that's literally what the science says. So you can feed into that and you can go along with that. But I question if you're just a Gen Pop person and your feed is just looking at somebody transition their bodies, what does that tell you about yourself? I just question that to some degree.
Yeah.
But I would be keen to hear your input on that.
I use them sometimes.
Yeah.
I do. And I know Amelia doesn't, and I've been speaking to Amelia recently, and obviously you've just said you don't really use them. So I definitely think I need to spend a bit of time reflecting on that more, about where we're trying to go. But I've gone from, again, this is obviously going to take some self-awareness, and a lot of coaches maybe aren't going to necessarily have the best morals, not from because they're not a good person, but maybe if you're in year 1 or year 2, you're just trying to do what you've got to do to grow the business, right? So I know that I used to probably push things that I wanted onto clients without really realizing it, which often got better transformations, but wasn't necessarily the right thing to do. And I would often post transformations even if I knew that they weren't necessarily the healthiest, or the client had not, something negative had happened to get that. And I would still post them because they were epic. And I don't do that anymore. So that's like me kind of being okay with the ones that I do post sometimes, knowing that the ones that I will occasionally post are completely them, like me, did not force any of my goals or onto them, and B, no negative consequences occurred as a result of that diet, which subsequently means that I post less, but does leave me with some to post. And that's kind of the middle ground that I've come to between showing off my clients' hard work and they deserve to feel good about that. Also, obviously reminding people what I can do as a coach, and obviously my own, you've got to live, and my own marketing and business generation, but also hopefully not selling any false streams or promoting anything that actually behind the scenes wasn't healthy. So that's kind of where I've landed on it. That might change in the future. I might stop using them altogether, but you're kind of seeing one every 2 to 3 months from me at the moment on average, which is kind of where I've landed.
And that, I was the same. My feed is pre and post transformation pictures back in the day. I ran a 6-week fat loss accelerator course. We're currently on week 3. So I'm not here to stop people sort of showcasing their bodies. Absolutely. I'm just saying, if your core value is what you look like, that's something that can be taken away from you.
Really quickly.
And that's a danger. Is that if I ask a client what, it can be a value. Sure, take pride in what you look like. We all want to look good naked. I'm not here to stop that. But I'm here to question if there's so much weight on you pursuing an image, or you looking a certain way. Is that healthy? I don't think it is.
No, exactly that. If someone is not sure if that's them or not, in terms of placing too much worth and on how they look, are there any questions that someone can ask themselves? Are there any things that they can look out for to kind of help them decide if they are on this health and fitness journey from a healthy place or not?
I mean, self-acceptance is, in my opinion, the key to long-lasting change. So if you continually can't accept yourself, like evaluate the level of self-talk you've got. If you're constantly showing up every day going, I need to work harder, I'm not good enough, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm lazy. If if that's just dictating this constant need to hang on to something else, you'll probably find you just move the goalposts anyway. You're never satisfied. So it's going to be pretty obvious if you've reached that place, because you're either content or you're not. You're always chasing something. So if I'll just lose a little bit more weight, or I won't post this picture, I'll wait for the next month, maybe I'll get a picture then, or maybe just a little bit more. That it's just a yellow brick road.
Yeah. So it's being content and not delaying, kind of attaching the happiness to where you're at and going, next week I will feel this, or next week I will do that.
It's conditional. Yeah. I will feel this when I get that. That's definitely not a healthy mindset to have.
Do you ever recommend anything kind of along the lines of journaling to clients to help build this like emotional awareness and answer these questions in an actual space created for that, rather than just kind of like floating in and out of their mind when they're busy?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Journaling. Sometimes if I'm stuck on a belief with a client, I'll get them to just use a word and ask and get them to think about that. So if it's like they're struggling with perfectionism or the drive to do something, I'll be like, maybe let's have a think about that. Like, what does that mean for you? Why do you feel you need to be perfect? If you're perfect, then what? So I'll probably just try to stick them to like a word, maybe. Yeah. It's less kind of, sometimes if you're not used to journaling or kind of meditation or the more mindfulness elements, they can be a bit like, can just seem a lot. Even I don't practice a lot of those things because, it's personal to you. What do you resonate with? If I tell a client to do something and it doesn't sit with them, then I'm going to shift it and get them to do something different. Journaling's amazing, but sometimes it can just be a word. It could be an event, just to sit with their emotions more in it. Yeah.
I love that. I feel like people are so busy, aren't they? And a combination of being busy and not prioritizing themselves means that sitting with it just doesn't happen, does it, for people?
Yeah. A lot of people struggle with time management and fill their time mentally, right? Because they're just so overwhelmed with, I guess, additional stresses that are either caused by themselves or not, or whatever. But yeah, it's I guess the grind mentality, especially in this industry, where you're constantly seeing people succeed, always want more, move forward. It depends on what that brings about in you as a state.
Yeah. I love that. That's been a real underlying theme on the podcast, is this concept of kind of, it's natural to have seasons, and sometimes grinding and pushing hard is self-care.
Oh, I like that, seasons.
But also sometimes you should have a season of maybe slowing down and saying no. And every single guest has kind of said that in one way or another.
Right.
And putting it, when I kind of, I don't want to say came up with that, but when I put that together in my own mind like that, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is right now I'm in a season of go.
Okay.
But sometimes people need to be in a season of, well, I'm having health issues as a result of that go. And it's very normal, bears have seasons of hibernating, the months of seasons. Maybe there's a season of needing to slow down. But as you said earlier, there's nothing wrong with sometimes being in a season of go and aiming for fat loss. So what are some strategies that females in particular, if there are any kind of differences you want to elaborate on, that would be great. What are some strategies in particular that females or anyone can take to diet, but do it in the physically the healthiest way possible, but B, ensure that they're not maybe affecting their mindset, relationship with themselves in the process? Are there any strategies, tips that you can recommend?
Well, from a nutrition side, I'm always going to want to see protein in somebody's diet, right? I don't think I need to teach people protein at this point. I spend more time telling them to eat less than I do more within this industry. But I still want to make sure that their meals are balanced. I think it's very easy for us to go, maybe reduce your carbs. I'll cut it all out. Like, it depends on what type of personality you are. So start with just really not excluding things. I think I used to be that type of person. Like, if you want to exclude it, okay, cool, that's what you want to do. But I definitely want to make sure that there's balance, especially from a female's perspective, for their hormones and just to support their body. Because subliminally over time, that food can just maybe get bigger and bigger and bigger the long time you stay in it. So not exclude any food groups in particular. Look at your portion sizes. What's the lowest hanging fruit? Do you think you can adapt something? It's not taking something away completely, but could you buy 3 coffees out instead of 5 this week that's a latte that probably contains more calories than you think it does. Or maybe consider changing a meal out because you eat out 5 times a week and it's actually not that much of a, big deal to you. It's not something you need to manage particularly. So increasing movement, obviously, from an output perspective, steps is a thing.
Yep.
It's a large part of your metabolism. So we are at desks a lot, and COVID did great for a lot of us, but then we just started working more. So people aren't getting away from their desks. They're just working through lunch, maybe going across the roads to get something to eat, or going to their kitchen, which is 2 steps away. So generally increasing your NEAT is always going to be, even though it's non-nutrition related, I kind of assess what their energy balance looks like in all parts. So
yeah, you can't just look at half of that equation.
Yeah. So looking at the portion sizes, looking at where they think most of their calories are coming through, and I get them to sort of evaluate like, okay, so what's going to be less painful? What do you think's the lowest hanging fruit here? Well, I do maybe have a couple of gin and tonics on a weekend. Cool. What do you want to do there? Do you want to have 1? Do you want to have 2? Do you want to look somewhere else for it? So it's kind of just, again, I guess you would need somebody's context to be more specific, but yeah.
So explain to me if that's okay, what is the benefit of what you've just done there, which is ask them in terms of where do you want to look, how many you want to reduce it to? Obviously, I understand motivational interviewing, but what is the benefit there in terms of getting the client or the person listening to decide that for themselves?
If you look at prescription from a medical perspective, the actual rate of adherence to taking medications given to you, like literally, here's this, take this 3 times a day, is shocking. We're terrible at it. So for me to say, eat 120 grams of chicken, this amount of broccoli, this amount of rice, sure, some people are going to be able to do it. But why? That's not an idea they came up with. I'm just telling them. So the retention of that, the thought process of knowing why they're doing it, the buy-in to it is going to be a lot less than it is making them think it's their idea. Or them going, oh yeah, that's a decision I made. It's ownership, right? You've got to own your decisions. They're not going to do very well if they think Didi told me to do that, or this is the plan. It might get buy-in initially, great results for a couple of weeks, but what happens in 2 years' time? And I'm not coaching them.
Yeah, I think that's the mark of a good coach, isn't it? When we care about the long term, and ultimately, if you're the individual listening, you should care about if you can keep it off or not, because it only gets harder to lose it every time, right? So how many of those swaps would you typically get someone to make in week 1? Are you just getting them to focus on just one swap or reduction or thing per week? Or how many might you get someone to kind of tackle on average?
I mean, week 1, I might not even make any changes because I want an accurate assessment of where they're at. So sometimes that takes a week or 2 just to get that. Yeah. If I start giving them ideas week 1, and then tell them to do a food diary, they might start changing things. Then I've got not really a reality of what does a 3-day intake look like for you? Well, she said maybe 40 grams of oats or 50, so I'll measure out this time. When they might have been on 100 or something.
Yeah.
I always remember fondly the first time I started tracking, or the reason why, is because all my S&C coach at the time and now boss sort of said, okay, well, how much oats do you have? I was like, I don't know how many oats I have. I weigh it. I don't want to live that life. So I'm definitely not like anti-tracking at all. But I went home and I weighed it, and it was 100 grams of oats. I was like, okay.
Good portion.
And I could eat. Like, I was overweight as a kid, so I have an appetite. And I just had no idea. So sure, like maybe a bit of tracking is something I'm going to bring in after a week or 2, just to give them that level of, right, all right, okay, maybe that's not a small amount of avocado, or that's a lot of oil or butter. Like, me thinking it's just a splash of milk is not a splash of milk anymore.
No, I love that. And what I've always really liked about your content is that we'll talk about the relationship of food, the behavioural change side of things. But I feel like some people, and the body acceptance and all of that, which obviously is key. I feel like some people have gone so far that way that tracking's the devil, and aiming for weight loss makes you a terrible person, which that I can actually relate to less than the bodybuilding approach if we're going to going to take extreme ends of the spectrum. So what I love is that ability to do both. So for people that, because I'll get this, so you female clients, but I don't want to track. I'm like, okay, cool. We definitely don't need to, but at some point we might need to, and it's just a tool, and hopefully we're not going to be emotional with it. And if we want to get ahead on our finances, we probably need to have a bit of an idea of what we're spending and what's coming in. It's just a tool, but ultimately it's not just a tool. For a lot of women in particular, there is a lot of emotion attached to it. So how do you maybe break that down and get past that, so that if you do decide you feel like a female would benefit from tracking even for a short period of time from an educational standpoint, how do you get them to implement that without maybe the negatives that sometimes come with it?
Well, you're right. Like the behavior is never the problem. It's the context to it. Weighing yourself isn't a problem. Weighing food isn't a problem. Tracking food isn't a problem. The problem is what your beliefs about it are and where you take that. So you could weigh yourself every single day. It's not an issue for you. You could weigh yourself every day, and it's your entire world of emotional dependence. It ruins your entire day if that number changes a little bit. So I kind of have to see sort of like, is that a problem or is that not? And I need to ask that question of, what does weighing feel like? Like, what does it feel like to you? Does it take up space in your brain? Is it all you think about? Because it's very naive of me to think that my coaching and why I'm doing them is the only thing they should be focusing on. It's the only important part of the day. I almost want to make it as non-important to them as possible and take the stress away. Whereas that's what people come to coaching for, right? I don't want to think about this. I want to outsource it. I may need to get them to for a period of time, think about it until we get a system and a strategy in place that's more routine and takes that away. But it's difficult. What was your original? I definitely digressed off that one.
That was all really, really useful too. But if you've decided that you do want a female client to track, and they're maybe a bit like, I didn't have a good experience with it before. Do you then just go, okay, no worries? Or is there maybe some middle ground or some strategies you use to implement that?
Sure. Well, I'll be like, hey, okay, so we're going to go on MyFitnessPal. It's going to tell you probably need to eat 1,200 calories. We're going to ignore that. I'm maybe going to give you a realistic target, and it's never just one number. You might see red on that number because maybe you'll track something and it'll go a smidge over. You're not going to worry about that. I'm probably going to give you maybe a gap of 100 to 300 calories either side. And we're going to see what that looks like. But I'm not going to tell them like, oh God, it's because I ate 2001 or I ate 1401 that this is now the end of the world. Also on the flip side, for tracking, it's sometimes a barrier to people actually eating more, especially with men. Like some of the men I'm coaching at the minute, I've given them a goal of 3,000. And I'm just thinking about one in particular. I looked the other day, it's like a sea of 29, 28, 27, 29, 28. I asked you for 3.
It's like a number to be below.
Why did you not? Like, so that's for me psychology fascinating. So I dissect that with them, and that's like 3 is just a bit scary. Like, why? It's a range. So never be sort of like it's one number, because that's not how the body works anyway. So I get them to track, give them a range, just make them feel as comfortable with it as possible. I don't expect them to be accurate. Nobody's accurate. Evidence shows that even food is legally allowed to be 20% inaccurate. So it's basically just throwing a dart anyway.
Yeah,
whether they like that or not is another question. But people want it to be as accurate. It's like activity trackers.
Yeah, also not very accurate, unfortunately.
No. Yeah.
What I love about that answer, and it's kind of been the theme for every one of your answers, is you've answered it with a series of questions that you might then say to them. And that's why I think coaching is so valuable, is it's very hard to ask questions of yourself. One, because maybe you don't know what you don't know, right? So you can't ask the question. And two, just the whole nature of asking yourself a question to answer it maybe seems a bit weird, and people just don't do it, or then they don't have space to answer it properly, e.g. journaling, which is obviously why coaching can be incredibly valuable, because you today have reeled off a series of like amazing questions that have got me thinking, and that's probably the magic in coaching, isn't it, right? Is being able to ask those questions to get to the root cause of why someone's feeling that way.
It's uncomfortable, like especially this industry. Emotions are not something we're particularly great at sitting with or even recognizing. So when your self-talk is maybe not great, and or you are consumed with, I need to change my body, and that's going to then make my mental state change. It could, granted, sure, maybe fat loss will help you on that. But it's not a direct correlation, and we need to appreciate that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued. What question sticks with you most?
The who definitely is the
Yeah.
most.
Yeah.
But really there's quite a lot there. I mean, I'm trying to juggle in my mind listening to you and simultaneously thinking of questions, so I'm really excited to listen to this back. I think what we'll probably do is I'll pull out the kind of series of questions under each relevant bit of context,
Right.
and probably put those in the notes, maybe even try and turn that into like a little interactive worksheet. So people that listen to this episode, rather than having to kind of remember the questions as they go, maybe we can get a link to kind of a jot form or something, and then people can kind of run through a little bit of the questions that you recommend they ask of themselves, because there's been some really great ones in here.
Good.
Awesome.
At least.
So, I mean, that really covered absolutely everything I wanted to go into. That was amazing. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'd love to know a little bit more about, just bringing it back around full circle, for if you are, you're chatting to a girl or a guy who is looking to maybe get into the industry, but they're maybe 24 to 28. They've been doing another job for a while now, and they're maybe a bit scared of starting again from scratch or not being good at it. What advice would you give to that person in terms of entering into the fitness industry?
Well, you're not going to be good at it. But first and foremost, let's have the acceptance of you're going to be probably pretty SHIT. Like, that's a given.
Yeah, I love
Nobody is, right? Unless you're gifted or something. I have no idea. If you can't look back and cringe as a coach for what you were doing when you first started, you're probably not a good coach. Like, you don't have 10 years experience if you've done the same year 10 times. So you need to be able to grow and adapt and look back and cringe at yourself. So you're going to have those moments. Like, own it. Be around people that are going to support that. Find evidence-based nutrition. I was very lucky. Like, I'd never really had a history of just, doing some rogue bodybuilding, being on stage and doing that. Or, not that is rogue, obviously, I don't mean that. But, like, being down a negative route with food from that perspective. So I entered into evidence-based nutrition. I had a firm knowledge of that's what's appropriate and that's what's evidence. Like, it's evidence-based, right? So if there's science to support something, you're probably on a pretty good show. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily translate into the real world, and that's where coaching and your experience will come with time. But follow good people, be self-reflective, find a course or like-minded people or a community that are promoters of health, first and foremost, because there's a lot of rogueness. This is basically a circus. Everyone's a clown, and it's hard not to.
Yeah, that's definitely the fitness industry.
It is, right? Like, we've been in this circus a long time. There's so many clowns, and I'm not getting rid of clowns. I'm also not here to have the responsibility of shouting about these clowns every day. I'd rather work on my clients. I'd rather teach them, to get to their goal, whether that's fat loss, performance, breaking barriers mentally. The clowns can do what the clowns do.
Yeah. I mean, probably a pretty obvious question, but, in hindsight, you glad you took the jump?
Oh, what, from nursing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That for me, now how I'm massively, massively overcompensating with working with people is because I spent so long, in an industry where animals didn't talk back. It was brilliant. I loved it. But it taught me no social skills. I couldn't hold eye contact with somebody.
Really?
Yeah. So I'd depleted myself. I threw myself into a brick, literally a 4-wall of nursing, small group of people. Didn't really interact with people outside of that. It was a small team. I worked with animals every day. Theatres, operations, whatever. And so now I've realised, you know what? People are actually all right. I like people. I'll work with them.
How did you find your first couple of years of being a PT when you had to sell coaching and deliver coaching to people as opposed to animals?
It was hard, definitely. I'm an introverted person. I'm not an extrovert. And being in social situations doesn't, fill me with, which is why I think I'm great at one-to-one, just not to beat myself up, but I think I'm naturally better at that than I am, maybe other things. Because I like building rapport with clients. I think that's why I'm good at the psychological changes, because it's not faked. Like, I genuinely care. I'm intrigued by what's going on for you, why you are the way you are, and why you eat the way you eat, and why you want the goal that you want.
Yeah, no, that clearly really shows. But it's always interesting, isn't it? Because normally the people that are best at that, like yourself, have had to go on some sort of personal development journey, whatever you want to refer to it as.
Yeah.
So for you, that's obviously more from a social people aspect, moving into this industry.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I was absolutely shredded when I was 23. Did all the same things. Been there, got the T-shirts of restrictive dieting, yo-yoed weight. I was overweight when I was younger, as I mentioned. That's a huge part of sort of your reflection of yourself and how you view yourself. So a lot of my entry into that was probably me just trying to prove to myself or my younger self that I had a place.
In the industry or within?
Both. You know, I have no background in sport. I hated PE at school. I called in sick. Like, literally, I'm still not naturally talented at sports or performance. So to show up to a gym every day is still very uncomfortable for me. But I sit with it. Everyone has their journey, you know. Is me just being in the industry now? Me just trying to prove to my younger version of myself that I'm worthy of being in it? Probably, yeah. If we're to go that deep.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm here because I love it and I want to make a difference in people's lives. And that's worthy enough for me to still be around.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I know that can always be hard to talk about, but yeah, very similar for me. Really bad at sport growing up. No natural athleticism. Definitely introverted. So there were some barriers to overcome. But yeah, I'm thinking of like the core group of people now that I know have been reaching out to me being like, oh, I might want to get into the industry. And I know that would have been really insightful. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. Hopefully it'll inspire a few people to take the jump from doing a job that they're not really passionate about to maybe trying to help other people. Because yeah, the best coaches are not necessarily the best athletes or the most athletic or the best physiques at all, are they? No,
not at all. But no, I'm curious. Tell me more about your transition into sort of more women's physiology and your interests. How did you end up there?
I mean, that happened gradually from a place of just wanting to be the best coach possible. And it's the right thing to learn. The one kind of specific story, which was the catalyst, was I had a female client turn up one morning and she was a little bit kind of all over the place. Really bad session, which wasn't like her. Asked to kind of call the session short, and I was like, okay, you know, just life, right? Didn't really think anything of it. And she messaged me a few hours later saying, oh, my period's just started. You don't happen to have any gaps like tonight, do you? And I'm like, as a 19-year-old, I'm like, I don't really even know what a period really is. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just like, it's just something that meant you put a towel down. Like I really had no idea what a period was. So I just read that message and remember being like, that's really quite odd. But I like this client. I trained her for a while. She did 3 sessions a week. And in hindsight, her adding that bit of information to the message was kind of like the start point of looking at it, because she sent me that message and I was just like, right, okay. I was like, I'm pretty sure it was 7 p.m. I was like, I've got 7 p.m. She's come back in and just had a really great workout. And I was like, considering there's maybe 9 out of 10 hours here and you've done half a workout already this morning, that was odd. And then I thought, oh, maybe there's something to this period thing. You know, and that's why she said it. And then that I probably Googled something stupid like, why would you be able to train harder when your period started? I don't know. I Googled something that didn't really make sense. And next thing you know, kind of started looking at this whole, okay, there's some female specific stuff that guys don't have, and it can affect training and mood. And yeah, when we kind of went from there, there was probably a good couple of years where I just assumed females knew it, and I assumed coaches that were further ahead of me knew it. And then when that became very evident that wasn't the case, one thing led to another. I'm in Thailand. COVID happens. A lot of my friends that were just class coaches in Thailand, whereas I was an online coach too, we all kind of lost our jobs. And then it became this, okay, how can I help my friends who need to have an online offering, and you can't if you're a great class coach, that doesn't really give you much to offer as an online coach.
Sure.
So it was kind of this like, okay, you're passionate at helping people, you're a great coach. How can we fill in some of the gaps with your education to turn this into a service, as well as just also logistically, you know, how do you do online coaching? And that was when I kind of realized really just how little a lot of coaches know about this. Also, thanks to being in Thailand for COVID, had a lot of time to study, and that just naturally led to building a course for PTs on female physiology. So yeah, none of it was kind of planned. It just kind of ended up here really, but all started just by being curious. I think that's a really great word.
Yeah,
Is
you're right.
if you're a coach, you should be curious and you should want to do right by your clients. You should want to always reevaluate what you're doing with them and if it's working. And yeah, it's led me here, but I can't say when I got PT qualified at 18 it was ever the intention, because I didn't know that it was even a thing. So how could it have been the goal?
That's amazing.
So yeah, here we are.
Well, it's amazing. It's to have, especially just, more men talk about it, which is why I love the boys at the gym, because, we have forced them into it to some degree because our demographic is, it is women of maybe perimenopause or menopause or younger girls, that maybe do need to consider how they feel during a cycle. And if you can't have those conversations as a coach, it's just a barrier, right? Like, it doesn't mean to say that every woman's going to feel comfortable enough to go, do you know what, I'm coming on like tomorrow, and they're going to have that level of self-awareness or even want to have that with you as a coach. But they should feel comfortable enough to have that, or to be honest. They
should know the options there.
Yeah. And I think it's a shame that for so long we haven't. And even as women, we're still, it's still, is it taboo? It's gotten so much better, but I still don't think it's a commonly discussed thing.
No.
Yeah.
If you look at my WhatsApp messages, though, it's definitely commonly discussed, not a big deal.
Oh, great.
Just,
I love that.
All female clients are,
nice.
because half of them are coming to me with that being the goal now.
Okay.
Which is crazy.
Great.
I do have HA, I've got PCOS, I've got really bad PMS, and which is nice to see. It's like, okay, my goal is improving that, as opposed to they come to me not being aware of that. I've got this weight loss goal, and then I'm like, oh, but you've also got this thing over here. Don't get me wrong, I still get that, but a lot of the time their health is actually what they're coming in with. So I'm obviously looking at it through a narrow and a biased lens, but to me it's not taboo at all to be having those conversations. It's literally my WhatsApp on a daily basis.
That's great.
How is the culture at Marchon? Do the guys kind of like understand it a bit? Do they try and chat with members about it? Do you have any systems in place in your classes to facilitate it, or is it just kind of like, we're here to chat about it if you need?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the boys have such a great relationship with the female clients, and obviously men as well, but it's that familiarity. Eamon always makes me laugh because he'll just ask that question. Sometimes you'll be like, yeah, maybe it is. Like, you take that sort of like, yes, I'm going on my cycle. It's not the answer to everything. So sometimes it's cute and funny to sort of see them talk more about it, and I love that. So yeah, they're educated. Like Eamon had a massive part in. We developed like a menstrual cycle guide for HQ, and just for women, just to give them that knowledge on sleep and how it affects, their training, or it can affect their training. But every woman is different, and every cycle is different, and you don't, in the beginning I probably was a little bit more like, this is how you're going to feel in the luteal phase and the follicular phase, and it's just
you
like,
can't do that, can you?
Exactly. So I think I was a little bit so excited by the evidence and the nutrition, I got maybe a bit carried away in the beginning, and now I'm like, no, just because you feel that way doesn't mean they are. Just because they get tired in day one of ovulation doesn't mean that they are going to feel the same, or there's going to be changes. Even with strength and muscle growth, right? There's no evidence to support that does actually change.
The cycle's just one variable that affects it, isn't it? Someone's might not have any other stress or any other issues in their late luteal phase, and they feel great, and then 3 weeks later their boss is being horrible, this goes wrong, that goes wrong, and their app tells them this is going to be the best week of training, you're going to feel awful, and it's just it's only one element of what actually affects your strength and performance. So which is why tracking it is really useful. I don't know if you're familiar with wild.ai. Great app. That's kind of what I use with my clients. I find that really useful.
Wild's good. There are some amazing apps, but you should be surprised how little women actually do track their cycles. So we're ambitious to think that we're even at that point. So many just don't actually know what part of the cycle they're at. Yeah. Or maybe they're on, birth control and they don't have a natural cycle, so they question that, or how that changes the game for them. It's so complex.
Yeah, it really is. And then what type of birth control? Is it hormonal? Is it not? There's a lot to it. But one very large part of my onboarding process is education on that, so where you're at in this, I guess, continuum of, if you've got HA over there, then Ollie, maybe PCOS, PMS, whatever, all the way to birth control, is where do you sit on that? That for me is really important. So yeah, it's great to hear that you know, you've got that guide and you use that with members, and yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it just gives them more insight into maybe how they might feel with their training in the sessions. I guess for the guys as well, to be able to have those conversations if they notice things like you did. You know, a client doesn't perform as maybe as they expected, or it's, you know, we're trying to peak in a strength week and it's actually not, you know, going to be the best week for them. So to have that conversation. We also have a lot of not competitors, but our demographic, you know, they are athletes, and that's a thing in itself. Is, well, what day is comp day, and kind of, does that need to change anything, and how are they going to feel? So yeah, it's a lot of
the 1% can matter, can't they, when you're trying to compete at that level?
Yeah.
But even for the everyday female, they can really care about their strength, performance, and especially in kind of CrossFit boxes, you know, they care about that. And obviously a lot of them care about scale weight. Yeah. So when you do have this thing that might influence and fluctuate that, I think it's really important to have some education on that, because it can be the difference between you not beating yourself up, you know, which obviously is always nice. And if you're not beating yourself up unnecessarily, because then you'll just get into that vicious cycle of everything we've been speaking about today with how you view yourself and sabotage and identity.
Yeah, you're so right. Even with the fluctuations of scale weight each week of the cycle, yes, still a woman will pursue fat loss and expect that to be reflected on the scale. Like, no, that's progesterone. No, that's estrogen. That's your boss being a dick.
Yeah.
Like, that's the extra chocolate you wanted emotionally. So when it comes to fat loss and a goal, sometimes we still don't even apply the female physiology to that.
Yeah.
Still a disconnect.
I think that, the industry hopefully will get better at that over the next few years, because, obviously you implement it with your coaching, I implement it with my coaching, more and more coaches are. So hopefully it will become the standard and the norm, and females will expect that, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
fingers crossed.
Exactly. Well, you're doing your part to try and change that in the industry. So that's all we can all do at the end of the day, isn't it? And hopefully it will get there. But there was so many incredible questions, reflections in there. Thank you so much for sharing all of that.
It's been great.
Yeah, I've learned a great amount just from following you on social media. So I really appreciate you coming here today and sharing that. And I've learned a lot more. So thank you so much for your time, Didi. Before we finish up though, I would love to just know a little bit more about the services you offer and what you're doing at Marchon, and where people can find out more about those.
Sure. Well, my Instagram handle, probably didn't think too much about this when I first did it a long time ago, but it's Diddles for Rizzle. So do your best to find that. It's not
put it in the show notes.
Yeah, put it in the show notes.
Show
notes. Everything's in the show notes.
Yeah.
So it's Diddles for Rizzle. My email is didi@marchon.co.uk. I obviously work for Marchon as head of nutrition there. We also have Sammy, who's an absolute superstar and specialises more in performance nutrition, and our athletes who are amazing. So you can find me there. I offer one-to-one coaching. I generally tend to work with clients for a minimum of 3 months, because that's just the best time I can get them results in, to be honest. So one-to-one, mainly at this point in terms of coaching. We are also in the middle of an FLA, which is our Fat Loss Accelerator course. So you will have to wait for information on the next intake of that. But you can apply for coaching in my bio, or drop me an email if you have any questions off the back of this, I guess.
Perfect.
Is that what people do on these? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly good at the whole.
We'll get that little interactive worksheet together as well. So I'll take all your best questions out of this and link that in there. And then if anyone's listening gets some value out of completing those questions and kind of developing that awareness, then maybe they can let you know and drop you a thank you for that.
Absolutely. That would be cool for them to do.
Is there any exciting project or event you've got coming up this year, personally or professionally, at Marchon, that we should keep an eye out for?
Oh, well, I'm speaking at Performex next month.
That's exciting. I'll be there.
Oh, will you?
Yeah,
yay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm terrified for my talk.
Are you?
It's anti-transformation coaching.
Okay. I like it. I wish I'd come out of that tagline.
I am terrified.
Because of the people or the topic?
Because of the topic.
Right.
Anti-transformation transformation coaching. Like, it's everything that's wrong with the nutrition and fitness industry is the title of the talk. So I'm
That's a big statement.
Yeah. I'm excited for it, nervous for it. Sammy's doing one on performance nutrition, and it's gonna hopefully be a great day.
No, hopefully. I'm sure
it will be. It will be. Confidence, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a great event. There's some solid speakers. Obviously, both you and Sammy are there. This will be out hopefully just before then if we can.
Cool.
So I guess we'll get Performex tickets in the
Yeah.
link in there as well if they are still available. I believe there's still some as it stands.
Yes,
Because we just grabbed some more yesterday. But yeah, nice group of us coming up. So I'm sure we'll see you there, and I really look forward to your talk.
Cool. We can have a reunion then.
Yeah, perfect. We'll see how the talk goes down.
Fingers crossed.
I think it'll be well received. People are starting to understand this. You can mess people out of a transformation.
It's a bold crowd to try and do it to, but why not?
What will be
Go
really
hard, go
interesting
home.
is who they put on before and after you.
I should probably have checked that.
That will be interesting how they like sandwich it with the other talks.
Yeah.
It'll be like UK leading prep coach on how to get shredded, and then it'll be
Well, Sam will be there. I'll employ her as bodyguard for the talk. She'll protect me. I'll get one of the guys.
yeah. Bring Ollie in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'll be okay. They'll all be there, won't they?
They will.
They're speaking. So
Nice.
yeah, nice. Looks like a good event. Any other events coming up this year, or anything else that you're up to?
Not particularly. I mean, we've got a million, obviously, competitions. We've got, NFGs and turf games. So there's a lot going on from the competition, the training aspect of things. But for nutrition, we're just focusing on obviously working with people one-to-one, helping them as individuals kind of get towards their goals, and whether that's performance, fat loss, or muscle growth. And yeah, it's hugely exciting. The brand's obviously growing massively at the minute.
Yeah, Marchon are doing great things. We'll be sure to get all of that in the show notes. And obviously, as I think I mentioned to you, we plan on using the gym mentorship service ourselves. When we can finally sign the lease deal, we'll be working with you guys on that, which is exciting. So yeah, love the brand. You're doing great things, and we'll get all those links in the show notes.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for being here today. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what people think of you sharing all of those insights.
Well, I hope they enjoy listening.
I'm sure they will.